Good morning. Good damp morning.
Yes.
May the grass grow. When I was little, we would do that song, and all the kids in the front, it's a Phil Oakes song, and all the kids in the front would go, grow, 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 while all the rest of everybody sang the words.
I'll have to try that next time.
It's go listen to it again, read it again, because it's this amazing song. And the idea is that we are grass. We are grass, and our persistence in growing is what matters. Because grass does not believe in learned helplessness. It only believes in growing. As all of us will know, tomorrow when we've got to mow our lawns yet again, if the floodwaters are down a little bit. When my son was born, there was this thing out there called Ferberizing. It was a very popular book by Dr. Ferber, and moms everywhere were going, you have to Ferberize your baby, you know, and I'm like, oh, okay, I should check this out, and I got the book, and my mom had come down for that, you know, for the birth of my first and only child, and she took one look at it and went, and I was like looking for a magical technique. It would promise that not only would your baby sleep through the night, you would sleep through the night, and the entire world would be better for it. Right? Absolutely. My mom just laughed, and she said, oh, they tried to get them to do that with you, with me. Silly men. Babies aren't supposed to sleep through the night. They're supposed to nurse. She never even cracked it open. I, of course, did immediately, and the behavior specialist in me at that time turned an angry shade of red. Why on earth would we want to do this to an innocent baby? Ferberizing your baby is really nothing more than the old cry it out technique, so the children should be seen and not heard school. In a nutshell, you put your baby in a crib, or nap, or night, and you leave them alone, literally all by themselves, crying until they stop, claiming this is a way towards self-regulation in the real world. But we're all really unique expressions of God. Some children, ready for bed, go to sleep quite quickly. Others take longer. Some cry themselves to sleep even in your arms. Some, when abandoned, cry and cry and cry and cry into deeper and deeper distress that exhausts their adrenals, and exhausted, they pass out. These babies and mothers were the targets of sleep training, and what I read in those books was a classic example of learned helplessness. Dr. Ferber was simply the secular version of a long line of men teaching women how to nurture, starting with Emmett Holt's, quote, The Care and Feeding of Children, which was actually originally called a catechism for the care and feeding of children, in 1894. He felt babies should not be played with, for example, and never, ever pick up a crying baby. Ever. Religious educators, steeped in the idea that we're all born in sin, seem to love the crying out technique. Oh yes, focus on the families. Dr. James Dobson has created a whole wealth of information. It's being carried on by his legacy as well. And experts that have been spawned in the religious right are still at it, despite deep current research. Quite the contrary. What a baby actually learns, no matter how you ask, what the baby actually learns, what we actually learn, is no matter how hard we ask, no matter how hard we cry, no one is coming. We are alone. Babies labeled good or easy are the ones who fall asleep quickly. Babies labeled stubborn, difficult. Now difficult's supposed to be a good word. Oh, he's just a difficult child. Or my favorite, bedeviled. They're the ones that are left to cry it out. For them, it's learning helplessness. If we personify God as a parent, how does that metaphor extend into us and our society? We live in a country where the vast majority of people say they believe in God, and the vast majority of people attend no religious institution and do not seem to always behave in what might be considered godly ways. I answered that question in my last sermon. In part, we have essentially been punished away from community involvement, which includes church. But I'd like to take it further. I'd like to speak to you today about how we kind of ended up here, how for years our society has been cultivating a population steeped in learned helplessness. It's devastating. Learned helplessness is the behavioral reason many of us are sitting in the soup of despair, feeling powerless to do anything to help heal ourselves or our world, our country, or our neighbors. We believe our actions don't make any difference. As Dr. Kenneth Nunn and Dr. Thompson so eloquently put it in their papers on issues of child psychology, quote, "Learned helplessness is the loss of hope." So what really is learned helplessness? So some little clinical stuff. It is a term for the state of being in which an individual believes themselves incapable of effective actions. Okay, it's a state of being where an individual believes nothing they do will change an outcome. First, it is a contributing state to depression in all mammals. Yes, mice can get depressed, and yes, they have studied it by creating depression in mice. First isolated and named in draconian experiments, considered unethical by many today, and yet we can't deny the information they have given us. By Martin Seligman and Steve Mayer in 1967, they placed dogs into harnesses and to hold them. They were fully restricted, including their heads, and into various subsets. Some had a bell rang and then they were shocked. Some were simply just randomly shocked, and some just were hanging there with no shocks and no bells. The dogs that heard the bell before the shock began reacting as if they had been shot. So anytime a bell rang, that was their response. They next created another group of subset where one could turn off the shock by pushing a lever. They did this by, if the dog could push the lever to the left or the right, the shock would stop. They then placed all subsets, one at a time, into a large box. They're called shuttle boxes. They're big, and they have dividers in them. It's a movable barrier. One side was electrified, the other side was not. So the harnesses come off, the dogs go in, and they're testing to see how long it's going to take the dog to jump from the electrified barrier to the non-electrified barrier, thus escaping the shock. That's the so they had expectations of this because, of course, you do when you set up an experiment. But they were totally surprised and caught off guard by the dogs in the harness who were randomly shocked. When the floor electric current was turned on, they did nothing. They simply sat or laid down. They made no attempt to escape and did not appear to be stressed. We now know that internally, of course, they were very stressed, but they presented no outward affect. They simply gave up, not exploring any options. Individually, learned helplessness is an internal and stable event, meaning the causality arises within you. The core idea is, I can do nothing to change this. It also will match with things like the difference between shame and guilt. Shame is, I am wrong. Guilt is, what caused this to happen? Can I change it? So you can pile on a lot of guilt, but you still have that ability to think, what could I change? When shame starts piling on, it's something inherently wrong with you. Learned helplessness and shame, I think, are intertwined. I need to sit with that more to think that. But as a core idea, and as that we're storytelling animals, we're going to create stories. And one of those stories is that we're born in original sin. And the born into original sin fits quite neatly because as sinners, we have no choice unless we accept being born again through Jesus Christ in a way that is told to us is the only way that we can do it. And who we believe controls and continues to control that story has a great deal of power in our world, and it dovetails into our hardwired system. Realizing that we're in control of opening our hearts to an indwelling Christ is one way that many have been able to free themselves and gain control, be it over addictions, be it how they walk in life, being able to parent in a holistic way. Realizing, however, that we are born into amazing grace, that we are born as part of original blessing, that is truly liberating. It's important to know that Dr. Seligman has devoted himself to the power of positive psychology since the 1990s, and Dr. Mayer has become a neuroscientist to discover the pathway to the brain that led to helplessness and has since, turns out they're all control related, and now is studying neuropathways to happiness. So what we learn and what we have the ability to look at, we can shift and go, oh, where do I go from here? Religious words like surrender and submission to God have been clouded and co-opted by secular realities of giving up, submitting to authority, and have now been changed to a loss of control and security, and even as we speak, are being used to justify a top-down control and a loss of unalienable rights. To the point where we're now actually arguing over rights as if they were something to be conferred instead of something to be protected. Unalienable rights are something to be revealed. Inherent rights that our ignorance of the divine has blinded us to. Nevertheless, they are still inherent. They are still holy. You cannot confer rights. You reveal rights. That's part of our job. When you surrender, the object of surrender is crucial. Thus, we surrender to love. We surrender to the holy. It's not the same thing as submitting to an authority out of fear, simply because they hold power over you. No matter which way you turn, you can't get away. No matter which way you turn, you are hurt. Submission is releasing into that which you are also a part of. One way to think about holy surrender is to think what it might be to cease resistance, but retain persistence. Rather than focus what's wrong, build up what's right. In a blog on Pathos, I found a quote from, it's a little ebook, At Work as It Is in Heaven, 25 Ways to Reimagine Your Spiritual Purpose and Work by J.B. Wood. I probably never would have come across him. Most of his books are on business technology. He does a lot on business technology and on handguns. So, but his definition, see, we have to cast this broad net. We really do. The definition resonated with me in this. Surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means engaging completely and fully in your life. Surrender is the opposite of giving up. It's giving in to who you are. It's not passive, it's active. But I have to trust God for the outcome. That's the hitch, and that's the mystery. And I would add, it's the opposite and the antidote for learned helplessness. It echoes one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite theologians, Henry Nouwen. Quote, "The spiritual life does not remove us from the world, but leads us deeper into it." The spiritual life does not remove us from the world. It leads us deeper into it. If your spiritual life is removing you from the world, maybe it's spiritual bypass. Maybe it's part of that piece of learned helplessness to keep you inactive. So how do we cure this helplessness that we found ourselves surrounded by? What are we supposed to do? It's important to know that when Seligman and Mayer tried to retrain the dogs who would simply lay down and accepted being shocked repeatedly, all their initial attempts failed. They scared them, they made loud noises, they did water sprays, they did all kinds of things to punish. They had cheese, they had to entice them over, they tried all sorts of things to get them across the barrier to the safe side, and they would not go. They stayed like little stuffed animals because there was nowhere they could go. They had generalized it. Their curiosity was killed. Looking for other alternatives, and I don't know this to be a fact, I haven't had the conversation, but I think just out of plain frustration, they picked up the dogs and started making the dogs' legs movement as if they were jumping over. And once they started making the legs move, They lifted them up over the barrier, mimicking the actual physical that they could not make their bodies do. And after a couple of tries, a substantial number of the dogs were able to then jump the barrier to safety. We all need help sometimes when we disengage. We need people to put their arms around us when we can't put our arms around ourselves. Later studies, other trainers discovered that if you took the dogs to a variety of other settings and then trained them into a simple task, and a lot of these dogs were a lot like stuffed animals. You pick them up, you put them down, they just stand there. Into some very simple tasks, shaping them like, would you like the liver or would you like the cheese? Giving them a choice of food because they were still eating, liver or cheese. Suddenly just the act of, oh, I choose cheese. Cheese or liver? Cheese or cheese? Which do you prefer? That simple act then started being like, if you take one step forward, you can get the cheese which you prefer. It was like one tiny step of, I have a choice here. I have a choice. And choices are what make up our ability to act creatively. The ability to go, I have a choice. How do we heal from learned helplessness? We wake up and we start making choices. First we have to wake up, and of course waking up does not happen all at once. Waking up is really difficult. And my favorite book, How Can I Help? By Ram Dass and Paul Gorman. The opening chapters are all about the waking up process of discovery, waking up to the fact that we are caring creatures, waking up to the fact that we are designed to help. My other favorite book is Sacred Activism by Andrew Harvey. Get these books. We can only help one step, one handful, one mouthful at a time. Every single bit helps. Be aware of choices in every moment, and even that can feel overwhelming and want to push us back into that. None of my choices matter, but they do. Every choice matters. Doesn't have to be a heavy thing. Let's see. What am I hungry for? Eat that. It can be a simple connection up to what that is. While the behaviorists and the neuroscientists may tell us it's all about control, they do. All of this is about control. It's about control. You have to, I think it's about choice. And you can argue that it's the same thing, but it does something different in your brain when you start thinking it's all about what you have to control, and oh, it's all about what I choose. Those moments where we feel everything is out of control, we can release, surrender, into the arms of eternal love. I want to read you a poem that came across, I don't know if it was the week before last. It's called Allow by Dana Fowler. And she puts this idea beautifully. There's no controlling life. Try controlling a lightning bolt, containing a tornado. Dam a stream and it will create a new channel. Resist and the tide will sweep you off your feet. Allow and grace will carry you to higher ground. The only safety lies in letting it all in. The wild and the weak, fear, fantasies, failures, and successes. When loss rips off the doors of the heart, or sadness veils your vision with despair, practice becomes simply bearing the truth. The choice to let go of your known way of being. In the choice to let go of your known way of being, the whole world is revealed to your new eyes. I love that. In the choice, the whole world is revealed to new eyes. That is waking up. That is waking up to, oh, where have I learned helplessness? Where do I need to wake up? In religion, surrender has been confused and abused, as I've mentioned. But I just wanted to peek into some translations and offer you Psalm 37:7 as a healing meditation, and 2 interpretations to show that surrender is not the same as helplessness. This is God's Word translation, which is sort of taking it into modern English. Surrender yourself to the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not be preoccupied with an evildoer who succeeds in his way when he carries out his schemes. And Psalm 37 from the New Revised Standard, and you can go online and find many, many other translations. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret over those who prosper in their way, over those who carry out evil devices. So what does that mean? It means be still and know. It means in prayer and meditation, open oneself to trust and eternal love. Yes, that language was gendered because that language is old. But the truth of that language still remains. You are loved. Surrender to that stillness in that moment and follow that love into actions in the world. Please go and get and read Sacred Activism by Andrew Harvey. Please go and get How Can I Help by Ram Dass and Paul Gorman. So many people think they can throw money at any problem and it will help. It cannot. It is not the answer, nor is it the solution. First, we need to see each other. We need to hear each other, and we need to hear ourselves. Ram Dass says, quote, "We have much more to offer than we realize. We have much more to offer than we realize. All we have to do is ask, how can I help? With an open heart, and then really listen. Remember, you always have a choice. Take your first best step. It is needed desperately. Even if it's in the wrong direction for a moment, we can turn around, we can step to the side, and we can take a first step again. Focus on what you can control. Focus on what you can do in any single moment. And remember, when you cry, you never have to cry it out alone. You are held in the arms of the world. You are held in the arms of the divine. Pull back the veil of learned helplessness and surrender to the compassion in your soul. Share that with others. May it be so.